Sure, here's part one of an original cinematic story based on your title. It sets up the characters, conflict, and mystery while remaining entirely original. 2. The summer heat shimmered above the cracked highway as four exhausted bikers rolled their motorcycles toward a forgotten stretch of countryside. Their leather jackets were torn, their faces bruised, and thick steel chains wrapped around their wrists, linking them together in a cruel line. Every mile they traveled echoed with humiliation. Drivers slowed to stare, some laughed, others recorded videos, but nobody stopped. Whatever had happened to them remained a mystery, and fear hung heavier than the chains themselves. Hours earlier they had escaped from a remote criminal compound after exposing an illegal trafficking operation. The gang had chained them together before planning their execution, but an explosion during a police raid created enough chaos for them to flee. They escaped with their lives but not their freedom. The chains could not be removed without specialized equipment, and every movement reminded them that their nightmare was far from over. The leader, Mason, glanced at the road ahead. His breathing grew shallow. We're running out of fuel. Derek checked behind them. No vehicles yet, but they'll come. Louis winced as the chains dug into his wrists. If they catch us again, they won't make the same mistake. The youngest rider, Cole, tried to force a smile. Let's just keep moving. Their motorcycles sputtered almost in unison before finally dying beside an old dirt road leading toward a cluster of tiny houses hidden behind cotton fields. Silence swallowed them. No engines, no wind, only the metallic rattle of chains. Mason looked toward the distant homes. We don't have a choice. The four men slowly walked together, each step painfully synchronized by the chains connecting them. Inside the nearest house, 12-year-old Elijah was repairing an old bicycle with worn-out tools. His grandmother watched from the porch. You've been fixing that thing all morning, she laughed. I'm almost done. Before he could answer again, he heard unfamiliar footsteps. He looked toward the road. Four enormous bikers, covered in dirt, faces bleeding, hands chained together. His grandmother gasped, "Stay inside!" Several neighbors peeked through curtains before quickly locking their doors. The strangers looked terrifying. Mason stopped several yards away. We're not here to hurt anyone, he called softly. Nobody answered. Another door slammed shut. Elijah noticed something everyone else ignored. The tallest biker was barely standing. Blood soaked through his jeans, his hands trembled. They weren't hunters, they were hurting. Ignoring every warning, Elijah grabbed an old water jug and walked toward them. His grandmother shouted his name. The entire street froze. The bikers looked at the child in disbelief. Elijah stopped only a few feet away. He raised the water jug. You look thirsty. None of the men moved. Mason slowly accepted the jug with chained hands. His voice cracked. Thank you. The boy smiled. Then he looked down at the heavy chains. His expression changed. You don't have to be scared. The men exchanged confused glances. Elijah stepped even closer. I'll help you? Though for the first time in days, none of the bikers knew what to say. A distant engine suddenly echoed across the fields. Every biker turned instantly. Black pickup trucks. Fast. Too fast. Derek whispered, "They found us." Panic spread through the tiny neighborhood. The trucks kicked clouds of dust into the air as they raced closer. Armed men leaned from the windows. They're here, Louis shouted. Neighbors ran inside. Doors slammed. Children cried. Mason pushed Elijah backward. Run. Instead, the boy grabbed Mason's sleeve. This way. Without waiting for permission, Elijah led the chained bikers behind his grandmother's barn. He opened a rusted wooden hatch hidden beneath stacked hay. The entrance revealed a forgotten underground storm shelter built decades earlier. Hurry. The four men squeezed inside, just as the pickup trucks roared into the village. Elijah closed the hatch, scattered fresh hay across it, and calmly walked back into the yard as if nothing had happened. Seconds later, armed strangers surrounded him. Their leader removed his sunglasses. Boy. Elijah stared silently. We're looking for four bikers. I haven't seen anyone. The man smiled coldly. I think you're lying. Elijah shrugged. My grandma says lots of people think that. One of the gang members searched the barn. Another circled the house. The leader stepped closer until only inches separated them. If you hide them. He leaned closer. People get hurt. Elijah looked directly into his eyes. My grandma also says bullies talk too much. The man's smile disappeared. Behind him, another truck arrived carrying more armed men. The village seemed completely surrounded. Deep beneath the barn, the bikers listened helplessly as footsteps echoed above their heads. Cole whispered, "That kid just risked his life for us." Mason clenched his fists. We can't let them find him. Above ground, the gang leader suddenly noticed fresh motorcycle tracks ending near the barn. His eyes narrowed. Search everything. Armed men rushed forward. Hay was thrown aside. Tools crashed onto the dirt floor. One soldier, like enforcer, stopped directly above the hidden hatch. He slowly bent down, then smiled. I think I found something. The enforcer brushed loose hay aside with the tip of his boot. His fingers closed around the rusted metal ring hidden in the dirt. A slow grin spread across his face as he tugged upward. Before the hatch could move more than an inch, a sharp voice echoed across the yard. Leave that alone. Every head turned. Elijah's grandmother stood on the porch, gripping an old walking cane with surprising confidence. Her gray hair fluttered in the warm breeze, but her eyes never wavered. The gang leader smirked. "Old woman, step aside." She shook her head. "That shelter collapsed years ago. Open it, and you'll bury your own men." The enforcer hesitated. The leader frowned. "Keep digging." Before he could continue, another shout came from the far end of the village. "Fire!" A thick column of black smoke suddenly rose above an abandoned grain shed nearly half a mile away. Half the armed men instinctively turned toward it. "What happened?" "No idea." The leader cursed under his breath. "You three, check the fire. The rest stay here." None of them realized Elijah had quietly slipped away moments earlier. While everyone focused on the barn, he had ridden his repaired bicycle through a narrow irrigation trail and tossed an old lantern into the empty grain shed, creating just enough smoke to distract the gang. Hidden beneath the barn, Mason heard the distant shouting. "That's him," Derek whispered. The kid created a diversion. Cole stared at the ceiling in disbelief. "He's 12, and smarter than all of us." Above them, confusion spread through the gang. Radios crackled. Orders overlapped. Dust filled the air as trucks repositioned toward the smoke. The leader looked increasingly frustrated. "Forget the shelter for now." He grabbed Elijah by the shoulder. "You know more than you're saying." The boy didn't flinch. "I know you're wasting time." The man tightened his grip. Suddenly, an elderly neighbor shouted from across the road. "Police!" Every criminal spun around. There were no police. Only the distant wail of a tractor with a broken exhaust that sounded strangely like sirens. Another trick. The leader exploded with anger. "No!" He shoved Elijah to the ground. Mason heard the cry through the wooden ceiling. His heart pounded. "We're done hiding." Lewis grabbed his arm. "If we go out now, they'll kill us." "They'll kill him if we don't." Without another word, Mason kicked upward with everything he had. The weakened hatch burst open. Hay exploded into the air. The chained bikers erupted from the ground like men refusing to surrender. The criminals froze for one shocked second. That second changed everything. Using the chains connecting their wrists, the four bikers moved as one. Years of riding together had built silent trust. Mason swung the heavy chain into one attacker's legs. Derek tackled another. Lewis pulled a rifle away before it could fire. Cole shoved Elijah behind an old tractor. Gunshots shattered the silence. Villagers screamed. Dust swallowed the battlefield. The bikers couldn't outrun bullets, but the chains became unexpected weapons. Every movement protected another man. Even surrounded, they refused to leave anyone behind. The gang leader fired toward Mason. Click, empty magazine. Before he could reload, Elijah hurled a wrench straight into his wrist. The pistol flew into the dirt. The leader stared at the boy in disbelief. "You little..." His sentence ended as Mason drove him backward with the full weight of the chain. The remaining criminals retreated toward their trucks. Then a new sound rolled across the valley. Hundreds of engines. Not 4, not 40, hundreds. Everyone stopped. The distant horizon shimmered beneath a growing cloud of dust. Headlights appeared first. Then chrome. Then leather jackets stretching farther than anyone could count. Motorcycles. Rows upon rows of them. The roar became deafening. The lead rider removed his helmet as the formation entered the village. His beard was silver. His vest carried dozens of faded patches. He looked directly at Mason. "There you are." The chained biker blinked. "Jack." Jack nodded. "When you disappeared, every riding club from 3 states started looking. More motorcycles poured onto the road. Then more. The villagers watched in stunned silence. The line seemed endless. Nearly 2,000 riders filled every road leading into the tiny farming community. Nobody had come looking for criminals. They had come searching for family. Jack climbed off his motorcycle and looked toward Elijah, whose shirt was stained with dust and blood. "You the young man who protected our brothers." Elijah looked embarrassed. "I just didn't want anyone getting hurt." The old biker smiled. "No, son." He removed a weathered club patch from his vest. "You reminded the world what courage looks like." Around him, thousands of bikers quietly removed their helmets. Not one spoke. Not one moved. They simply looked at the boy who had faced armed criminals without running away. Even the captured gang members lowered their eyes. For the first time that day, complete silence covered the village. It wasn't fear anymore. It was respect. And no one there would ever forget the child who looked at 4 desperate strangers, smiled without hesitation, and simply said, "Don't be scared. I'll help you." Jack stepped toward Elijah and rested a weathered hand on the boy's shoulder. "People spend their whole lives talking about bravery," he said quietly. "You lived it in a single afternoon." The village remained silent as distant police sirens finally grew louder. This time they were real. Within minutes, deputies and federal investigators flooded the area, taking the surviving gang members into custody. As officers examined the chains around the bikers' wrists, the lead investigator stared in disbelief. "These aren't ordinary restraints," she murmured. "These are custom-built transport chains." Mason nodded. "They were made to keep witnesses from escaping." Witnesses. He reached into the torn lining of his leather vest and carefully removed a tiny waterproof memory card. They weren't just trafficking people. He handed it to her. They were trafficking evidence. The investigator inserted the card into a portable reader. Her face changed instantly. This contains names, bank records, shipping routes, and videos. Another agent looked over her shoulder. This could dismantle an entire criminal network. The gang leader, now handcuffed beside a patrol vehicle, heard those words and lowered his head. Months of terror had collapsed because one frightened boy chose compassion instead of fear. As emergency crews finally cut through the heavy steel chains, the loud snap echoed across the village. For the first time in days, the 4 bikers stood free. None of them celebrated. Instead, Mason walked directly to Elijah. He knelt until they were eye level. When everyone else saw dangerous strangers, he said, his voice breaking, "You saw people who needed help." Elijah smiled shyly. "My grandma says you can learn who someone really is by how they treat people when they're scared." The old woman stepped forward, embarrassed by the attention. "I only taught him kindness." "No," Jack replied gently. "You taught him courage." News helicopters soon circled overhead. Reporters arrived expecting another crime story, but what they found was something entirely different. They found neighbors bringing food to exhausted riders, children decorating motorcycles with handmade ribbons, officers shaking the hands of men they had once mistaken for outlaws, and at the center of it all stood a quiet 12-year-old who never asked for recognition. The story spread across the country within hours. People didn't remember the names of the criminals. They remembered Elijah. Weeks later, more than 2,000 bikers returned to the little farming village exactly as they had promised. This time they came in peace. They rebuilt damaged homes, repaired fences, paved the road leading to the school, stocked the local food pantry, and raised scholarship money for every child in the community. When they unveiled a small bronze plaque beside the village entrance, only one sentence was engraved upon it. "Don't be scared, I'll help you." Elijah stared at the words quietly. "They're too big for me," he whispered. Mason smiled. "They're not about being big. They're about making one brave choice when everyone else walks away." Years later, riders crossing that highway still stopped at the village. Not because it was famous. Because it reminded them that heroes don't always arrive wearing uniforms or riding the fastest motorcycles. Sometimes they arrive on an old bicycle with dusty shoes, a kind heart, and enough courage to help complete strangers. If this story reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change thousands of lives, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes ordinary people can become extraordinary heroes. Until next time, remember that courage is contagious, compassion is unforgettable, and one fearless heart can inspire an entire world.